two schools of thoughts, and I'm happy that one person is in government, the other one is in the consulting space or in the private sector. There has been a push from the private sector that the duty to decide which contractor is more qualified to do the work must be given to the consultant for the reason that the consultant can do it quicker, and they're in the engineering space. For that reason, they have the technical insight to determine which bidder will be more responsive. On the other hand, government feels that the biases that the private sector would have and the unethical practices like giving out the project value to a contractor that they favor would be a problem. So I want to know, in your opinion, what are the pros and cons of having the consultant or the government or the public sector as the client determine who to appoint when there's a bid, when there's work to be done?
Okay, Ronnie, I hope you heard that.
Actually, I was still trying to process it, just trying to get the crux of it. It's necessary in terms of who is the best person to be appointed, given the constraints surrounding either private
let me
sector
just
or
say,
public sector.
would it help the problems that we have if the consultant takes over the whole procurement function and does the advert, does the evaluation, and only at the stage of awarding the letter comes from the client? Could that be if that responsibility is given to the consultant, what would be the advantages and the disadvantages?
Okay, so for me, every time I think about procurement, I always think about procurement as a strategic sort of function within an organization that helps any organization to be able to achieve whatever objectives that they might want. So government already has predetermined and legislated objectives in terms of what is it that they need to achieve through procurement. So if you look at any government department that needs to procure construction services or consulting services, first of all, before you even talk about who needs to do that, you first need to understand what's the overarching framework that's there. You need to meet issues that have to do with BEE. You need to meet the procedural fairness in terms of part. You need to meet all these other legislative to private sector, just now to explain in terms of how they could work out.
Ronnie,
so the first starting point for me is that what is the objective?
We are losing you. There seems to be, the signal seems to run away from you as you speak. So I think we lost you at the point. Yeah, we can hear you. We lost you at the point where you're explaining the objectives.
Let me go back. So in as far as your question is concerned, I do think the most important thing, more often than not, is always the objective of the client. If the client is clear that this is what they want, and this is the objective that they are setting as far as the procurement of those services are concerned, then that makes things a bit easier to decide in terms of who should be involved. So the whole part, in as far as any institution should be concerned, should be on two things primarily. First, should you outsource that decision or should you do it internally? If you are doing it internally, it means that you have the skill, the processes, and the integrity of those processes. In as far as you are concerned, you are very much happy that those processes are able to fulfill whatever objectives that you have. But if you outsource the process, it means one thing: you don't have the capacity. For example, there's no way a municipality can go and procure for, say, a nuclear power station. Let's say Matatira municipality, that's where I come from, procures for a nuclear power station, where, as in the case, they've never done anything to do with nuclear to start it, and they have no clue whatsoever in as far as there is concerned. So in that case, what government needs to do, they have to outsource that to private sector to do from the time they decide from the time when government decides that what they want is actually nuclear power. They don't know what type of nuclear that they want, but from the time that they decide that this is the kind of project that they want, and up until the awarding of that, primarily one, contracts are used as an instrument to de-risk whoever does not have the capacity to take on the responsibility or the liabilities that come with whatever the work that you are doing. So if you're saying that you are going to appoint a consultant to do that for you, you're actually saying that, you know what, I think I know what I want, but I'm not sure on the process I need to use in order to achieve what is it that I want. So in my view, in a nutshell, the most important part is the objectives. Deciding on who to appoint always need to depend on, not on the politics. I don't think the appointment or the outsourcing of whoever and so forth has to be a question around politics, or in fact, if say, or transformation or whatsoever and so forth. If you want to appoint a black-owned consulting firm, I mean, government can do that. They can just say, as they always have been done, they can say 50% black in as far as the B scorecard is concerned. I mean, it's easy to deal with the political and transformational elements of procurement, but what's important for me in that decision has nothing to do with just merely saying that who will have the power and who will be in a position to be more corrupt than the other. It actually has to do with who has the capacity to actually deliver with minimal risk whatever service or outcome that you want in the best way possible. If you as a government institution have no clue whatsoever what is that you need to do, you have the contract. The contract is your most powerful weapon that you can use with whoever that you work with. So if you appoint a consulting firm and say that, okay, we're appointing you to help us design maybe some sort of schools or prison or a defense, whatever that may be the case. What might be important is actually you deciding whether do you know or do you have all the information and the capacity to take on that work. Most government project managers I've engaged with, more often than not, they would tell you, I'm managing a portfolio of projects, about 6 or 10 projects, and I'm actually not even engaged in 6 of the projects. I'm sure about the 4. I'm actually not sure what's going on. I'm just actually freelancing in as far as those projects are concerned. And if you have appointed a project manager or you have appointed an internal consulting team to deal with that, and everyone is too occupied to be actually trying to deliver value for whatever client, let's say it's education or health, then you're actually defeating the entire process of what you're trying to do. It just means that you actually have to take that out and trust the fact that you have the instruments to be able to control or decide whatever outcomes that you may need. But the biggest problem, obviously, of course, with government is actually the fact that they're even incompetent in managing contracts. I mean, contract management in government is terrible. I mean, they have no, okay, maybe the most that I've dealt with, they have no clue in as far as whatever contractual provisions are that might actually help them achieve particular outcomes. The expertise is just not there in as far as government is concerned. So my short answer is that, look, government needs to just get the contract management and governance right. But in terms of running the actual processes, my view is that in as far as things are right now, whether municipal, local, national, or SOEs, there are some SOEs that know what to do, there are some that don't know what to do. So my view,
Yeah, there's an interfering noise. I'm not sure where it comes from. You're
okay, I think it's gone now. But on just to close off, I do think that, look, in as far as government is concerned, my view right now, the practical, actionable advice is that for stuff that government has no capacity to do, they must completely forget about trying to do those things, because that just leads to more corruption, that just leads to more issues in as far as government is concerned. But government needs to invest in delivery management, the ability to initiate a contract and deliver it without necessarily being involved in the technical aspects of it, because they don't have the capacity in as far as things is concerned. The ideal situation is that government should have the capacity to do those things, and they should do them well within those. But if there isn't capacity, the best position guys to actually do that work is actually private sector. And I'm saying this not because I'm saying markets or the ideological question to say that markets must always be involved in everything. Look, South Africa, in as far as things are concerned, government can't even come with RFPs to specify the kinds of PPPs that they want. They have to depend on the market. So the clear answer to you is that if the department or whatever organization don't have the capacity, forget about government being involved in it. I certainly know they mess up even a simple tender document that just needs to be submitted out, they make so many errors, and you find that the contract, maybe the contract value of whatever project they are delivering, so they say it's $1 billion. They would mess up and make so many mistakes in that. And contractors, more often than not, there are some contractors that might be happy to deal with that, and they would know that, okay, incomplete information, we're going to deal with them when we actually go on site and just leave it out there. So if you don't have the capacity, don't do it, but invest in the ability to manage contracts in terms of managing the consultants you appoint, in terms of the contractors that you appoint. So that's my view in as far as this is concerned.
Thanks, Ronnie. Sibani, do you think if the function of adjudicating tenders is outsourced to the private sector, it will help us deal with the corruption that's currently engulfing us on infrastructure projects?
Thank you very much once again for the question. Okay, my view is that firstly, if I can just present sort of like a background to my thought process with regards to this issue. First of all, I have a problem with the fact that the current model of public procurement right now is that at first it doesn't really necessarily make a distinction between the procurement of goods and services and infrastructure development in as far as legislation is concerned. You'll find this within government institutions as well. The procurement process will just basically be left to the hands of SCM practitioners, and the built-in, especially with regards to infrastructure development and procurement, and the built environment professionals won't necessarily play a major role in that process. And for me, that is a big problem, because the built environment professionals are the ones that truly understand the requirements and will truly be able to assess the risks that are involved, and will be able to make the correct decisions as to the right kind of skills, the right kind of experience that are needed to be able to deliver the projects that will realize value for money, right? So I think that for me, giving that to the private sector will just lead to more problems, because in as much as the private sector may have the necessary expertise, who then will appoint these private sector consultants? Also, that presents another problem now to say, if Sibani has the power, he can appoint or influence to appoint his friends to be the consultants that are going to handle the adjudication. Also, within the private sector itself, it could present an opportunity for nefarious actions. I mean, obviously, not everyone would do that, as is the case now, but obviously that presents that opportunity for those kind of things to take place, you know. Another issue for me would be the professionals or the built environment practitioners within the department have an advantage of first case knowledge when it comes to the strategy, when it comes to needs analysis of what is to be procured and what is to be delivered. If we're bringing in private sector consultants in the procurement stage, I mean, obviously now you present, okay, this is a project we're trying to get out on site in 5 months' time, do the assessments, do the adjudication, whatever, right? So they get into the process at that stage. They don't have a full background of what exactly is the intention of the client, what exactly is expected of the client, and to then say, okay, we will appraise you of what exactly has happened. I mean, obviously there is information that is going to fall through the cracks, and already that presents another problem wherein they won't have a full grasp of exactly what exactly are we looking for with regards to the services that we're trying to procure for this particular project or this particular package and the likes, right? Okay, the main advantage for me in the giving this a part of the process to the private sector would be the turnaround time. That for me is the obvious one, where they'll be able to do it quicker because they don't have the same steps as government has to go through with regards to those kind of things. There are many processes that the government has to go through. For instance, if in my department, if a project is worth more than 50 million, it not only has to go through the adjudication committee of the region, be it Durban, PE, or whatever, it also has to go to the National Bid Adjudication Committee. So that is time in itself. And obviously, if I submit it today, maybe the bid adjudication committee is sitting next week. Maybe then it will be postponed to the next 2 weeks. So obviously, you see that the problem of turnaround time. Whereas in the private sector, the company or the group of companies that will be given that task don't have the same problem. For them to adjudicate that work and to evaluate it will be much quicker than in the public sector. Expertise, of course, the private sector, that's another advantage of you have an office full of engineers, you have an office full of quantity surveyors or architects, be whatever. So there is an obvious advantage of expertise that they would bring into the table. But for me, I would still prefer the process to be within the public sector, because if there is a problem, the public sector is enacted in as far as legislation is concerned to act when there is an issue. Because if there is an issue with the private sector is not empowered by the Constitution to act, but the public sector can act with regards to whatever piece of legislation they have, in as far as the accounting officer of that department or that unit is concerned, whenever there are issues that relate to corruption or whatever. For me, to address that, there are public sector built environment professionals that have expertise within government institutions. I think one of the things that is a problem is the empowerment of these professionals to be able to take over this work and to not let the process be led by the SCM practitioners, because SCM practitioners in themselves find themselves overwhelmed with the number of work that they have to do, because you'll find SCM practitioners have to handle facilities management, they have to handle maintenance, they have to handle goods and services, they have to handle infrastructure projects. So you can already see that there is a number of contracts. Each project manager probably has 10 contracts that they have to deliver. And now you're going to take all these contracts and packages to the SCM practitioners. Already they are overwhelmed with work, and that presents a challenge in itself. And the process becomes a tick box exercise where they just want to see, okay, is this guy compliant? Is the tax clearance? Is it there? BEE, CIDP, is he registered? And it then devalues the process of the evaluating the contracts based on the actual criteria or the risks that are involved, and whether or not this particular supplier will be able to give us value for money. And it's not just a tick box exercise, let's pick the lowest price, whatever. So I think that the public sector itself needs to be empowered, especially the built environment professionals within the public institutions. They need to be empowered to be able to be more involved and to just take over that process. Even if they are SCM practitioners that are specifically moved to deal with infrastructure and not anything else, I think that would really help a lot.
Thank you. Thanks. I see you nodding there, Gundo. You agree with both of them, even though they gave different answers. You are on mute, Gundo. You are on mute.
Thanks. I think what is encouraging is that the guys are really applying their minds to the answers. And when I knew the answers would be different, because one is coming from the private sector, from the public sector. But But by and large, there's some convergence in the fact that it's better placed in the public sector, and I think they both put very good reasons for that. The understanding that procurement is not just to get the best road; it's also being used to correct certain things that are wrong in society, like inequality and so on.